In the great northern port, the air was always thick with the smell of brine and the sound of hammering. Kaelen was the most gifted shipbuilder of his generation, but he was also the most feared. It wasn't his strength that intimidated people, it was the gale inside him. When a joint didn't fit or a supplier was late, Kaelen's temper didn't just flare, it detonated. He had burned bridges with every major merchant in the province, leaving his legendary workshops silent and gathering dust. He lived in the wreckage of his own potential. His hands, capable of carving the finest hull curves in the world, were now trembling from a cocktail of resentment and unspent adrenaline. The ascent to the high light. Bankrupt and broken, Kaelen climbed the 300 stone steps to the Blackrock lighthouse. Elias, the keeper, was a man whose skin looked like weathered parchment, and whose eyes had seen 1,000 shipwrecks. "I am a slave to my own blood," Kaelen confessed, slamming his fist into the lighthouse wall. "I know what to do, but my feelings move faster than my reason. By the time I realize I'm angry, the damage is already done." Elias didn't offer comfort. He led Kaelen to the outdoor gallery at the very top. A hurricane was brewing. The wind was so fierce it threatened to peel the clothes from their backs. "Look at the horizon," Elias commanded. "Most men think the goal of life is to stop the wind. They spend their lives building walls and hiding. But the wind is life. It is energy. You cannot stop the wind, Kaelen. You can only change how your sails are set." Elias gave Kaelen a single piece of rare, brittle ironwood and a dull chisel. "Carve a perfect sphere. If you break the wood or throw the tool, you start over with a smaller piece. You will do this until you understand the 3 gates of the rudder." For the first month, Kaelen failed daily. The ironwood was stubborn. Every time the chisel slipped, Kaelen felt the familiar heat rising in his chest, a physical pressure behind his eyes. "Stop," Elias would whisper. "Don't fight the anger. Just watch it. Where is it in your body? Is it in your jaw? Your fists? Describe the feeling to yourself as if you are a scientist observing a strange animal." Kaelen learned to label the feeling. This is the heat of frustration. By naming it, he separated himself from it. He was no longer the anger. He was the man observing the anger. The second gate, the 10-breath void. In the second month, Kaelen learned the void. When the animal of emotion lunged, Kaelen had to create a vacuum. He practiced breathing into the bottom of his lungs, counting 10 slow beats. In those 10 seconds, Elias taught, the chemical fire in your brain begins to cool. Most mistakes are made in the first 3 seconds of a feeling. If you can survive 10, you can survive anything. The third gate. The pivot of purpose. By the 3rd month, Kaelen could stay calm, but he was stagnant. "No," Elias said. "Take that heat, that energy you used to use for screaming, and channel it into the edge of your blade. Anger is just fuel. If you let it explode, it destroys the engine. If you compress it, it moves the ship." A year later, the King's Admiral arrived at the port. He needed a scout ship built in half the usual time to intercept a fleet of pirates. It was a suicide mission for any builder's reputation. Kaelen took the contract. Disaster struck 3 weeks in. A heavy crane snapped, dropping a massive mast directly onto the finished deck. Months of perfection were splintered in a heartbeat. The shipyard went silent. The workers backed away, waiting for Kaelen to explode, to roar, to fire everyone in sight. Kaelen stood over the wreckage. His face turned crimson. His hands balled into white-knuckled fists. He closed his eyes. 1, 2, 3. He felt the animal clawing to get out. 7, 8, 9. The heat began to dissipate into his limbs. 10. He opened his eyes. They were as clear as the morning sea. "Clear the debris," Kaelen said, his voice low and resonant. "Check the hull for structural stress. We will use the salvage wood to reinforce the bow. We aren't behind schedule, we just found a way to make the ship stronger." The ship was finished 3 days early. It wasn't just fast, it was resilient. Kaelen had built his own composure into every plank. He realized that control is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of its direction. He returned to the lighthouse, not as a student, but as a peer. Elias handed him the cracked mirror from the old stories. "The world will try to tilt your floor every single day, Kaelen," the old man said. "They will insult you, fail you, and break your heart. But as long as the man in this mirror remains a stone, the waves are just scenery." Kaelen looked at his reflection. The fire was still there in his eyes, bright and fierce, but it was no longer a forest fire. It was a forge,